All right, everyone, what's going on? Great to have you here for this Demand Gen Expert series featuring Dave Gerhardt. We do this every month on the first Thursday of every month at 12 p.m. Eastern, and we're back at it again today, talking about building community. It's something that both of us have done quite well. Dave with Dgmg, us with Demand Gen Live. We've been doing for over 18 months, and so hoping that through our conversation today, we can give you a lot of tips, some encouragement, potentially some strategies so that you can go and implement this at your company or for your business or however you want to apply the knowledge. And so let's get into it. First question, Dave. What do you think are some of the most important ingredients to building a community?
Oh man. Okay. First of all, if my audio is still quiet,
You're perfect.
Hit me up. Perfect. Okay, great. I think the most important. There's one singular one, and it's expertise. How's that? I think that the way to build a community today is people want to be in communities where you're an expert, whether like you're into working out and you're in a subreddit on calisthenics, and that's like where you get your information from, right? Like we all want to deal with experts, and I think especially in the world of B2B where you're selling to another business, it's typically that. It's like the opportunities is to win by like expertise in marketing or expertise in finance. You're typically trying to solve some problem where they're looking to your brand as an expert, and that's where you can win. And also, like, this is why I'm obsessed with like the founder story and just like the context of the company, because typically there's like that company was started for a reason, or you have some unique advantage. And so I think like the best B2B marketing strategy is to lead with education and expertise.
Mm-hmm. Expertise is a huge one. It also moves in. There are some communities that aren't necessarily content first. I've noticed about yours, it's like pretty heavy content and expertise focused. Other ones are kind of like Slack communities. People just talk. It can be a lot of noise. Yeah. So I'm definitely into the expertise. I'll add a couple of them and then we can riff on.
I think the other thing though is like what I've learned is like the thing that I'm learning, Chris, with Dgmg is like the reason it's working is because I'm the moderate, like I'm in there and like I care. And so like that's a lesson. Like I've done this. I've hired the intern to run the community and then wonder why it doesn't work. And that's like not a knock on the intern, but it's like the reason Dgmg is working is because I have this marketing experience and this is something that I'm passionate about, and I'm like, I know what to say in that world. And so I think like you have to build a community with that in mind. Like you can't just like say like, yeah, we're going to start a Slack group and people that are interested in our company can join it. Like, no, I have a very clear focus. B2B marketing. It's hosted by somebody who's done B2B marketing, right? I saw like John's comment like in chat about too often communities are pushing the brand. I mentioned this session yesterday at HBS. One of the companies was like, our company name is X, Y, and Z. We have this amazing community that has a completely different name. Don't you think we need to brand them together? And I'm like, no, the reason that community is successful is because it's not the community that your brand created. I think so many companies, like the bias is to like, we want to make a community, but we also want to make sure it's really beneficial to us as a brand. And they have to be like, I guess the word is like tangential, right? Like they have to be, it's not a place to push your products and services. You get that benefit from it, but it has to be completely like, would you go and join that group whether you worked at that company or not?
Mm-hmm. I'll point out a couple of things. You mentioned their engagement, but engagement from people that have the expertise, right? So this could be the same thing about like outsourcing your comments on LinkedIn or other things. Like one of the big ways that you build community is through those one-to-one micro interactions that are very meaningful and filled with expertise. So that's one. Another thing that I'll point out, I think that a huge driver in community, especially if you're running it tangentially to a business, is that it needs to be centered around a movement or a change that's going on in the world. It's like basically around your narrative. So like, Dave, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see it for yours, but for ours, it's like the world of B2B marketing is changing a lot. It's changing a lot, and the old way of thinking about things with attribution and leads is one way. If you want to go that way, you can go that way. But we have this community over here that's going to teach you a new way that's way more effective, and so we're helping people understand if they want to be part of this movement, there's a way that they can learn and progress and things like that. The last one I'll say that's super important in B2B, I think, is that people are really, if you look deeply into they're in the communities for mainly professional advancement and learning. And so figuring out what are other ways that you can add value to that specific thing. So it can be expertise, content, but you've put in job postings, right? Career advice. There's a lot of other ways that you can generate professional advancement.
So what you mentioned is like you said that the community has to be built around this change. I disagree with that, but let me get there and you'll see where I'm going.
Cool.
I actually think that what I was going to say before is I think that the first thing you have to think about is community is like a product, right? And so like what's the hook? What is the offer? Like what's the hook for your community? And so I actually think, Chris, the storytelling technique you're using is describing this like change that's happening in the world. But to me, your hook is, hey, there's a lot of shit going on in B2B marketing. We're experts in this. Stick with us. We'll teach you. Join our stuff. And we're just like you in the same stage, right? That's the hook. And so I think like if you're thinking about launching a community, like put your like Don Draper hat on for a minute. And this is like the fun stuff to me is like, all right, what ingredients do you have? Like, oh, we have all these really influential people in our network. So maybe we could tap them in. And like, I'm always just thinking like, how can we tell a compelling story about this? The goal is not to just make like the community of CFOs, right? Like you need to come up with a compelling hook that's actually going to help you build an audience. And so maybe over time you want to pivot and be the global community of CFOs, but wouldn't the better one be like the B2B SaaS CFO forum for SaaS companies doing $1 million or less, right? And like now you've niched down and you're like, I bet you can go build a community there because you're going to go find 10 to 20 like-minded people. And then from there you can build up. Like I always think you got to nail the hook, but then like it's important that what is your wedge to actually start building this community, right? Now, Chris, you could pivot this to 15 other things now that you have this slice of B2B marketing, right? Like I think we also obsess over like we want to build a community, but we're not really sure how to go from like we want 1,000 members in there. We don't even know how to get the first 10 in there.
It's also the idea that I don't think that you necessarily need 1,000. I think that a lot of the best communities are ones that are smaller. I think that as communities scale, sometimes they dilute the value of the actual community.
But, it also comes back to like I think the ultimate question I would ask is like, selfishly, you do want to benefit as the company. Like that's why we're doing it. At the end of the day, you're doing it because it's got to be good for business, right? And so I would think about like the strategic question I would ask is like, what is the niche? What is the niche that it would be valuable for us to be known in? Or like what would it be which type of community for us would it be valuable for us to have? For example, as Refine Labs, Chris, you all could go out and create a super exclusive inner circle of 100 top CMOs that's very hard to get into, right? And you could fund that and it could be amazing. But secretly, those are 100 of your dream customers for Refine Labs, and you happen to host that. And so like that's like at the drawing board stage of creating a community, one of the key questions that I would be asking myself.
So we talked through a couple cool strategy things. I heard niche down. I heard think about the hook, maybe not a movement, but a hook. I like that little clarification, Dave. Thank you. And then driven around expertise and engagement. So now, like, I want to hear the story from you. Like, how did you actually how did you get this started, right? So a lot of people see what it is now, which is amazing, but what are a couple of the first steps that you took?
Okay, so I mean, it's none of this would have been possible with. So now I have 4,000 members, 4,000 paying members in this community today, and none of that would have been possible though if I hadn't spent like I really want to come up with some like sexy talk, like how I grew this thing to whatever, but like I'm struggling with it because the reality of it is like the main reason was because I had built an audience on LinkedIn and social media and through what I had done at Drift and other things. And so like I guess the real advice would be like start building like if you want to build a community, looking back now, the best thing that I did was build up an audience. And it was really through LinkedIn. It was like I started consistently posting on LinkedIn about B2B marketing probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the response to that, I had always been on social media, but I had just kind of like randomly posted stuff. I loved marketing. Sometimes I talk about marketing. Sometimes I talk about my workout. Sometimes I talk about my sandwich. Like, never really clicked. But on LinkedIn, I just focused on talking about B2B marketing because I was working at Drift at the time, and that was where our target customers were. And so, like, what I noticed was I started posting on LinkedIn, and the response to my stuff on LinkedIn was like not what I was getting on Twitter, where like nobody would ever reply back. It was like, oh shoot, Angelica, who's demand gen manager at company that I've heard of, like commented on my post. Sweet, okay. And so it was like, it was the first like real social media channel that I felt like a holy shit like response from. And so then I doubled down on that. Like you start to like, as you publish, you start to realize which topics people were interested in. And for me, that was like B2B marketing, and then also just like sharing my experience as like a working parent. Not that I can relate to like being a mother, for example, but like I really was passionate after my kids were born about like being vocal that like I'm at home for them for bath time. And so like I really focused on those two topics, and as I'm posting more, I'm getting feedback, seeing what's working. And I basically committed to like 2 to 3 years of consistent posting. And then I'm doing like podcasts and speaking and a lot of other things. When I decided to leave Drift, I had this idea of like, I want to try to like I think I could create a paid community. I've been posting for 3 years on LinkedIn. I had however many thousand followers, whatever. And I felt like, look, if I have 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, there's got to be a Facebook group of 200. There has to be. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try that, and I'm going to try to do something completely different. I want to make this a paid thing because I just have this hunch that like maybe people are willing to pay for it. Maybe if people pay for it, I'll share a little bit more, and I'll be a little more honest than what I'm sharing on social media. And maybe we'll get a little bit more commitment from people. And so I decided to do that on Patreon because it was really easy. I timed my last day at Drift when I sent that announcement. I drove everybody to my Patreon page, and so it was like I got like 300 members on the first day. People just wanted to hear like why I left Drift, for example, and then I just fed that thing with good content. Like I think the hard part is like I love marketing. This is what I like to talk about and do, and so the content creation part was easy for me. It just became then like it's almost like the LinkedIn thing, but now in a community. I'm talking about copywriting. I get 30 comments. People want to hear more about copywriting. Let's do more of that. It's just the community part is the ultimate feedback loop. But for me, it all started with having an audience first, and now it feeds itself. But there's no. I wouldn't recommend like just if you have no audience on any other channels, if you don't have an email list, if you don't have a LinkedIn following, I wouldn't go immediately start a community. I would first build an audience.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that I would kind of say that the audience that you had on LinkedIn was a community. It just wasn't in a specific place like a Patreon or a Slack group or a Facebook group, but a lot of people that are engaged with the information in a specific place, commenting, getting to know one another, and then you just move that to a place that's more of a traditional platform to have a community. But it's a critical first step, right? Because I think a lot of companies, as you mentioned, we're going to get into some of the mistakes that companies make as we see. And one of them is that they don't have an audience, and then they just try and stand up whatever it is, Slack community or some type of like, there's a tech platform that does some type of group. And a lot of the companies, and the mistake that I see is that they think that it's only for customers. And would love to hear a little bit more about
Brutal.
that. Cause
I mean, that's what I don't want
that.
people to take. That's what I've seen this over and over. Like, let's start a community and let's invite 20 of our VIP customers and we'll post about new product updates. Like that is not that's bad marketing. That's not what people like are actually genuinely interested in. The opportunity is to be that resource, and the opportunity is to be like the thing that gets me fired up is when somebody sends me a message and they're like, I literally got a promotion because of something that came up in the DGMG community. Like I feel like I got better at my job because of that. That doesn't come from a community where people are like, here's 3 new ways to use our product. It's like you have to completely separate those things. Another thing that I think like, and we're all marketing people on this, like I think we don't give enough credit to is like to know this is why I love marketing. Like this is the art of it, like knowing what to create, right? So like if you've have years on social media in your niche, you have a much better sense of like, I think I could go start a fun community because I think I know what people are interested in. Like going into starting a community should not be the time to like, let's figure out what marketing people that are interested in. Like there's an element where I need to keep figuring out what people in DGMG want. But like if I know, like I just hired a content agency to help me scale content, and they're like, this is amazing because you have endless ideas for content. I'm like, I know, because I'm in the community all day. Like I see all these conversations. My issue is not coming up with creative content ideas. It's actually execution right now. And I just think like we don't ever factor that into like the community building part, right? And this goes beyond having a deep understanding of your customer that they talk about in like product management research. This is like, what are they actually thinking about? Like what are their desires? What are their wants? And like who do they get influenced by? What are the things they talk about? That's the stuff that you have to know, and that's really, really hard to fake.
And I think most people undervalue this like consistent real-time feedback loop of when you communicate something with content or a message and then you get a bunch of comments, and then if you actually read the comments and try and understand, okay, from this person from this type of company with this job title that was saying this, let me try and understand why they have this perspective or why they're asking this question or why they said this, and then you do that. Like Dave and I get hundreds of comments.
I'll give you a real example. Like I posted this line like that: life is too short to work for a CEO that doesn't get marketing. And I saw like the reaction to that was like people were laughing, tagging other people, like, and it had this little tiny viral thing. And I was like, that line has something. And so then I wanted to come up with a video to promote the job board Dgmg Jobs. And when Danielle and I had talked about that, it was like, oh, what if that's the hook? Life is too short to work for a CEO who doesn't get marketing. And so I spent like $7,000 out of my own pocket to go and make this video because I knew that it would work. Like I knew that line already like was hitting with people. And if we made a funny video that was actually executed right, like I felt so good about justifying that cost. And granted, I could just make that decision on my own, but like, I think that's such an underrated skill in knowing what to go and create. And you all must feel this, right? Like, how do you pick the topic for the next session that you're doing? It's like, well, you see questions today, you see what's happening on social, like you're in the middle of this stuff all the time. I don't know how to like perfectly articulate what that's called, but you have to do it for your industry. And this is hard, right? We're in B2B marketing. It's easy. It's not easy if you're in cybersecurity or, certain other industries. I get it.
When you look at some of the best communities, at least for marketers right now, the thing that I notice is that most of them are not from vendors. And
that's why they're good.
And so this is I want to peel back the layers to help people that are from vendors that want to start a community, because there's a reason why this is the reality, and there's a reason why $100 million companies go out and buy a community, because it's difficult to build one yourself because you have competing interests. And so would love to hear you go a little bit deeper on why you think that companies struggle with this part.
I think just because like they're not clear on the goal, right? It's like, it's almost what you talk about a lot with like your take on social and like it being an awareness channel, right? Where if you're going to do a community to generate some type of sales, or we want to drive more users in our product, you can do that. It's a different strategy than like, I think you have to be very clear on the why. Why do you want to create a community? And so I could articulate it like whether that, like, here's a perfect example. Look at Outreach and Sales Hacker, right? Outreach bought Sales Hacker because it's valuable, because they didn't build Sales Hacker. They could have, right? But they bought Sales Hacker because it's valuable to them to have an audience of 100,000 people on an email list in the sales community. And then like over time, you can figure out how to sell to those people, right? Like, and I'm doing it now. I sell things to the DGMG community all the time. Like, But you have to like be clear about where that fits. And so it comes from having a clear perspective on like, look, we believe that the way people buy is because they know, like, and trust brands. One of the things we want to do to get people to know, like, and trust us is start a community of peers in marketing. And we're not going to measure that by sales. We're going to measure that by number of members. And so one of our goals, like you might have on a goals slide for the year, like X million dollars in pipeline, right? But next to that, you might also have a goal of 5,000 community members in Facebook. And then, like, by the way that you're going to grow is by not doing things that promote your business. Is like the value in community is being that resource for everybody. It's like the group of peers. How can you be that resource? And it surely doesn't come from talking about your product all the time.
Mm-hmm. I think as I dive into a couple of things, I find that community is typically something that gets bolted on to a different team, marketing, customer success, something like that. And then it inherits those teams' KPIs, which drives the wrong reasons to start a community, right? And so my recommendation for people that want to do this in marketing is that you need to actually have a separate team that has separate KPIs that does not get dragged back into MQLs or pipeline or whatever else that you have, because it's going to change what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, or like I think most companies, it just gets lumped into the social media role. And so whoever is managing social media is also managing the community. And what that means is popping in the Slack group and saying, "Happy Tuesday, everybody. Here's a new link to a blog post that we wrote." And that doesn't work. That doesn't work either. It really comes down to like this should be a conversation at the like it's not at most companies, but like ideally should be a conversation between like the founder and the marketing leader and the product. And I wouldn't even have the product or salesperson in it. It's like at the founder level. Every founder should want to have a community. Like that's the most insane thing. If you're an e-bike startup, you wouldn't want to have a group of 10,000 e-bike fans. Of course you would. Like that would be like the number one marketing channel. And like, so I think it has to be at that level. If it's at the like marketing only level, then it becomes like a customer feedback group, which every customer group just eventually dissolves into like a way to bitch and complain about the product and the features. And so like, then you don't win in either scenario, and everyone's smirking because it's happened to them.
And then the last one I want to put as a note for people is identifying when is the right time to actually do this. I think that companies try to start a community before they're organizationally ready. And so when we kind of alluded to it at the beginning is do something in public with content and information and expertise and demonstrate that people like what you're doing. And then after that, work on how to, if you want to siphon it to a different platform, how to start moving people to a different community. But my recommendation, because of reach, scale, and then just proving out the model and that you have expertise and information that people want, that you can produce it in a volume in a way that people want it. And then you can kind of like do market research and narrow in with what topics or what type of like segmentation you want to use.
I would say, what's the hook? What's the hook? That's the only question. The only question is, what's the hook? Everything else is tactics. Do you make it in Slack? Do you make it in Facebook? Do you make it in LinkedIn? And I can answer some of those questions when we get there. I have opinions on them. But I actually think that whether your group is hosted on Slack or LinkedIn or wherever is not why you will succeed or fail. A great hook and a great idea for a community will find its way to success on Slack or Facebook or LinkedIn. Like, and you can then move it or change it. It's the offer. It's like, this is the marketing 101. Like, it is the offer. If you have the best idea for the group that's going to really resonate, it's not going to be where you have it. There'll be pains, but it comes down to the hook.
Okay, we're gonna get into Q&A, people. So I got one more for Dave, and then if you have questions, feel free to start dropping them in the chat, and we'll pick you up, and you can maybe come on live and ask your question to Dave and I. So Dave, for last question here, and I've watched you kind of like, as the community has been growing, it's been evolving in like the offering and what's everything that's going on. So let's say that you have something that's starting to get a little bit of traction. How do you keep evolving that to add more value and grow in membership and not have this kind of like dilution where it ends up with people just complaining about product feedback?
I think you have to treat it like a product. You have to treat it like a product, and you have to in like what makes a good product. A product is some what makes a good product team. Like good product team is always listening to customers. They're shipping stuff regularly, right? You have to be shipping stuff regularly, and so I'm always trying new ideas because the cost is very low, very low, and I love this format that you all do here, and I was like, I should do something like this with DGMG members, and we just did it this week. I have like 600 registrants for a webinar tomorrow. There's not many B2B SaaS companies that would get 600 registrants for tomorrow, but like, oh, why is this working? Because it's real. It's not a vendor thing. And now that's a signal to me. I tried this. I got 600 people register. I should do more of them. I post videos. Like, I think you have to always be thinking about how are you going to add more value. And I also think that the huge opportunity is like to over deliver. And to over deliver means like make people like everyone's going to be skeptical. Like I have a lot of people that are skeptical. Why does this guy charge for this community? Most people have this for free. But then most of the times if you come in, you can see that like we over deliver on the level, on the content stuff. So you got to really show people, you have to ship a lot of new things to figure out what sticks, try different formats, mediums, whatever. But you also have to like deliver more than what you would outside of the community. It has to feel premium or exclusive or unique or different. It has to have that angle. Why are you there?
I love that. I'm sure people have tons of questions. So Angelica, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's bring Omar on. Let's see.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
What's up, Omar?
Awesome. Hey, Chris. How's it going? Dave, how are you?
Omar, what's up?
Not much. Just went to founderbrand.com, signed up for the book. I'm very excited for that. No
See,
pressure.
when you say things like that, people are going to think you're planted in here, and you're not.
No, definitely not. Everyone, for the most part, knows me pretty well. I think at this point,
Okay,
so
okay.
that's definitely not planted. But you got to give credit where credit's due, and I appreciate people like you who, as busy as you are, you're finding ways to produce work like that just to give back to the community. And like, look, let's face it, you don't make a lot of money on a book, so it's definitely a very.
No, I'm going to. I'm not doing the book for charity. I promise.
That was a trick. I was testing you.
Anybody that says they're not didn't do it. I am doing the book for money.
Hell yeah, I love it. See, I love that. This is why I like you, Dave. So Dave, here's my question, and it's more of a technical one. And just for context, for me, I work with medtech founders and startups, right? Selling to physicians. So a lot of physicians are specifically on Facebook. You can't find them though. So the majority also spend time on LinkedIn, right? If I were to make, let's say, a community of, let's say, medtech sales and marketing people, which all of them are on LinkedIn, but Facebook has much better platform for a group community, just in terms of how it functions. Do I go with the platform that has the better functionality for a community? Do I go to the platform where most of them are hanging out? Or do I try and do a platform off of those social media platforms? Because at that point, like I don't really own the group, the social media company does.
Yeah, I it's a good question. I think they're on LinkedIn, but they're probably also on Facebook, and they're probably also on, email. I think that it's what's on LinkedIn is their profile, and like they're there. But I think that if you have the right offer for them, they're going to go anywhere. I don't know. I don't think it matters. I really don't. I don't think it matters in your case. I think like you could also start it on LinkedIn to test this, and like it blows up really quickly, and like people will move, right? Like you have to be confident enough in like if I build something, I will be able to move this. If you think people are there, then go to where they are. I think that's the stronger. There's going to be pros and cons of either one, right? I have a group on Facebook. Everybody hates Facebook right now. Am I going to get canceled because I have a Facebook group? I don't know. But like, there's just things like that like, you're never going to be able to, or like a lot of the Facebook functionality is actually very good. And then there's some things that suck. Slack groups, I think, are awesome for messaging, but I think they're really shitty from a content perspective. And so the long-winded answer is there's trade-offs on every platform. The thing that matters the most is friction and where people are. And so if those things are in your favor, then I would just build it on LinkedIn. And if you get to 100 members and want to move it, then great. People will come with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Good luck.
Only other thing that I'll add, Dave, that was a perfect answer. Only other thing that I'll add is you could consider doing what we did here with Dgmg Live, which is using some type of event to get it started. And then you can basically collect feedback. So it's content and event first. And then once you see and hear which people are attending, you can actually poll the audience and say, if we wanted to start one, where would you want it? And you can get feedback that way.
It is hard. Also, you got to deal with everybody's going to always tell you a different preference. There's people who are going to want it on different channels, and you just have to say, yeah, I know it's only here for now, and we'll see where it goes.
Got it. But that's solid advice. And essentially, Dave, just to kind of summarize, your thing is just go where the people are, where it's easiest, start it there, and then if you have to move it, do it.
Yeah, I think you haven't proven that you can build a community yet, and so like that's goal number one. Is forget about what could happen on the right. I'd rather deal with my philosophy, and people don't agree with this always, but my philosophy is like, what's going to happen if this changes on LinkedIn? I'm like, you haven't even proven that you haven't proven you have product market fit yet. Like, go do that first.
Can I add an add-on just real quick? So I did build 2 different groups on LinkedIn. One's got over 1,200 members on it. The other one's got 300. And I just noticed that unless you're really, really actively like managing it to like push conversation, ask people to jump in, the engagement isn't it isn't there. It isn't as easy and as intuitive as Facebook. And I'm wondering, part of it is just that I'm doing a shitty job and I just need to improve. The other side of it is that I'm trying to wonder, like for me, even the groups I'm in on LinkedIn, I don't engage a whole lot in them, but the ones on Facebook I do. So I don't know if that's
this is like therapy. Yeah, you just answered your own question. If I here to spit this back to you, this is Omar. Omar wants to build a new community. He's tried twice on LinkedIn and hasn't loved the engagement. So now he's going to try on Facebook and see how that goes. Just try it. Try it. Like if it doesn't work, you're back to LinkedIn 0 for 3. It's okay.
Awesome. Thanks, man. No,
Cool.
he's fucking right.
He's
He's right.
No, but
He's
and by the
absolutely
way,
right about
if
that.
you've already had mild like 1,200 members, 300 members, that's great. You must know what it takes. I think that your hypothesis is that it's not that you don't know how to build a community; it's that you might have not selected the right tool. And so for this next one, you're going to see if you can get the tool right.
Yeah. Perfect. You're right. This is like therapy.
For all of
Next
us.
session. Let's do this. Good to see you, Omar. That was a great
All right.
question.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's get John on here. Here's a question.
John, welcome to community therapy.
Yeah, well, I don't need it. I'm already way over the hill, so, No, I'm going to call BS on a couple of things here. This whole hook thing, I think you're projecting onto us what we need to do, but let's face it, the reason you guys have popular communities is because of you guys. We follow you.
That is the hook.
You've built an audience, though, right? It's not something. It is something we could all do, but you got to build it over time. You got
No, but like I think of that. I think of that as the hook, and I'm not trying to argue with it, but like I think that's like the ingredient. Like, oh, Chris has built a following for himself. Okay, hey, we're Refine Labs. We want to build a community. What should it be around? Oh, interesting. Chris has built a following. Like, I think that's an ingredient in the toolkit to create the hook based on like what does each company have available. And so like if you're a company today and you want to build a community and you don't have a Chris Walker, then don't try to do that. You pick a different strategy and maybe you're the community that curates other experts or something like that. That's why I just present that as the hook.
No, I agree with you. I just think the real reason you guys are successful is because of you guys. I follow both of you because you have great things to say. That's it. I don't follow a lot of other people or other groups because they're not offering out the same kind of, wisdom on a regular basis. So you're right. I mean, there are other ways to do this, but it's harder, much steeper climb.
It is
kind of like chicken and the egg.
On the
though.
hard part, that's also good. Like, this advice is very hard. This is not every company can do this, and I think that's why it's such a differentiator. And like, you might not always have the right ingredients. You might have cool ideas as a marketer, but like your company is just not that interesting, and we've all been there. And they're like, yeah, make a community, and you're like, I don't know if we have the right fit. Versus like if you were at Slack or Zoom or whatever, you'd be like, oh, I could make a community. Like, so I think you have to be realistic about that too. I get it.
Mm-hmm. And for me, it's kind of like chicken and the egg. Is it people want to be part of the community because of me, or people want to be part of the community because of my perspective and my point of view? And I think that you have the hook, right? Like my point of view of where marketing is and what marketers should be doing, I think is the hook. And then I am the vehicle that delivers it. So maybe from the outside, it looks like people are doing it because of me, but honestly, I'm not that interesting, just me as a person. Like what people are here for is my ideas and my intellectual property, I feel like. And everyone's got that, right? I could go and name people in the customer success community like Jay Nathan or Christy Faltruso or other people that, so there's or CFOs and things, there's pockets of everyone where there are people that have a point of view, which is the hook that gets delivered through their own message. And so I'm kind of in the camp where you need Dave calls it a hook, I call it a point of view or a movement, but you kind of like need that for people to know what they're trying to be a part of. Thanks, John. Nice little back and forth there.
Could you guys break down the difference between an audience and a community?
Yes, I think that a community, I don't know like the textbook definitions of either, but at least like the way that I interpret them in my head is I think an audience is not necessarily on a channel that you own or like that. Like I think when I think like, for example, I think audience to me is like Twitter, LinkedIn, an email list. Community is like the place where people are somewhere behind closed doors or whatever having conversations. And I think that you need to build an audience so you can build a community. But I don't know if I'm right about that. I'd be curious to hear Chris's definition.
I'm going to make a weird analogy. I don't know why, but it just popped into my head. So imagine that you're like a pop star or a rock star or something. Like no matter which city you go to, or like if your music's on Spotify or where anyone's accessing, you have the audience. The audience is there for that person, regardless of the distribution medium or places like that. And then think about the community as like the VIP group that like goes backstage or like does something like that. I think that's an interesting kind of like parallel to look at it, where the community is in a specific place and the audience is more about the point of view or the person or the group.
You're welcome. There's this week's Demand Gen Live LinkedIn clip that you will all see next week.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Love that answer. Let's get Max on. He had a couple questions.
Hello, guys.
What's up, Max?
Greetings from Belgium. It's quite late here, so I'm in the dark place. But thanks for all the nice content you're providing, Chris and Dave. I had a couple of questions. I will start maybe with the first one. I work at a B2B marketplace. And we started a few months building a community on Slack, and it was for us quite hard to. First, we got not that much engagement on our post, and we did a lot of efforts with live Q&As and this sort of things. We were experimenting with a bunch of stuff. And then my question was like, on which kind of metrics do you, when you're starting off with a community, and which kind of metrics are you like optimizing on, or how do you know that your content in the beginning is effective enough for the community? That's my first question.
I think I would say that I don't have like hardcore benchmarks on these, but like member growth is important, right? And so I think like, can you prove that? Because I think step one is like back to the hook conversation. Can you prove that you have a compelling value prop to get people in there? And so like number one would be like, and I've set goals about this. Like at Privy, for example, we wanted to launch a Facebook community, and we said, well, how many people should we have in there? We're like, how about 1,000 in the first quarter? Sure, that sounds good. That'd be a good test to see if like people can get interested in this. And I think that was a good goal. I would say that like engagement not from you. How's that for a scientific metric? But like, and this is not a hardcore number, but like, I think that for me, when I saw the DGMG community start to take off, it was because like I would go into the group and there'd be like 5 posts from new members asking questions and people responding. And so I think like you have to come up with some like gut feel benchmark of like, if there's 100 members in there, but the only content in there is you posting to tell people to comment on something, that's not a community, right? Like I know that now if I go and I see people like you want to look for some engagement, which is like comments on the stuff you post, but also are people posting without you, and are people helping each other? Like are members helping each other? Are they asking questions? Are they tapping into the community piece of this?
For me, I'm not sure I'm going to say anything groundbreaking here, but for me, it's who, like, are the right people there? And 2 would be engagement. And so you can look at engagement in a quant type of level, how many likes, how many comments, how much things are happening, or you can look at it at a qualitative, what's the quality? And I just tend to lean into the qualitative because I think that you get much better signals there. And so I'd be looking at like, what exactly are these people saying? Like, are their comments like one emoji, or is it 2 paragraphs that's deeply engaged, and looking at some of those type of things? Audience growth and things like that are super important.
Qualitative is a great piece of advice. Like, because for example, like I started to see like people would email me anonymous questions about their salary and asking about help negotiating, like super like deep stuff. And I'm like, yes, this is the stuff that we want. And I think, I don't know how to articulate it, but Max, you probably know what those types of questions would be. And so you don't just want to look for like phantom activity, which eventually dies. Like you want people to be able to come into that group and ask meaningful things and get value back. Like, so looking for that qualitative ways of seeing our people getting value from this.
Do you have another question, Max?
We are providing a lot. Like I said, we were testing a lot with different content types, and I was like wondering like, how do you repurpose your content that you're building for the community? How do you repurpose it maybe for other channels, or what is a bit of strategy there?
It's tough to say depending on where you're at with the community. I think like in the early days you probably can't afford to be making a million different types, but I think like whatever you create, the value has to be unique to the community. And I think like you have to be creating exclusive content for the community. And you could decide like, I think a great way to do this is like, you could basically do an hour's worth of content and maybe you trim off the last 30% of it. And that's going to be exclusive. Like you have to be able to mark the line and like, look at the content that you're creating. Which of this is behind the paywall? Which of this is community only? I think that's how you increase the value prop of the communities. You have to show people that what's in there is exclusive. The other thing that can be related to this is you can then use insights from the community to drive like which content that you can go and create next. I think that's one of the most valuable things is getting a sense of what to go create based on the things people are asking for.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was also our hook a bit to see like to repurpose it into other channels, just because we don't have that much engagement in the beginning. We don't have that much engagement and we don't have that much members also. So also we spend some efforts and some resources to build this content. So it's also like a bit of a pity to not repurpose it to other channels. It's a bit our strategy also there.
Yeah, my recommendation on this would be to take the content from the community and then pick a channel or two that's social with reach and try and get your the signals there. Try and get people are responding, people like this, and publish there so you can figure out. And then once you have locked in, like this is what people want, these are who the people are, then try and get them into a community. You might have just been a little early in trying to get people into Slack or somewhere.
Yeah, cool strategy. Thanks.
Awesome. Good to see you, Max. Thanks for joining from Belgium.
First person from Belgium, or
Good night, Max. Good night, Mo.
It's only like 6 or 7 p.m. there, I think.
Well, that's when I go to bed.
Okay, Michael has a question. I'm going to bring him on now. Michael?
Yep. Sorry, I didn't know I had to
No
click
worries.
on mute. Cool. I hope I'm the first one from Austria. Long time listener, first time participant.
Hold on, let us check. Hold on 1 second. Yes.
Yep,
Check.
first one.
Studio got me. Yep, you're good.
Awesome. So I resonated with John on his point about the hook being you two, Chris and Dave. Do you know examples of successful communities that don't hinge on the founder? Like, what solid non-person hooks have you seen?
Gain,
One that
grow,
I've seen-
retain in customer success as like gain, grow, retain in customer success has about 10,000 members that isn't led by one single person. Is a very clear comp. I'm sure Dave has a couple too.
I've seen this one, Traffic Think Tank, which is like SEO. What else? Superpath. Oh, Superpath is a good one. Let me link to that one. Here. Yeah, those are good. Pavilion
Cool,
is Revenue Collective. Yeah, Revenue Collective. I guess that's another one. What's interesting though is I think the Revenue Collective is an interesting approach that I think would work if you don't have the personality, because basically you're just tapping in. You're tapping into others, right? And so like, I think if could you go and try to tap 4 or 5 leaders and like, make them, could you come up with some, could you get equity shares to get like 3 or 4 influential people in your industry to like help you jumpstart your community? Or do your founders know? I mean, in my case, like at Drift, it depends on the company, but like I had founders who were well known and had amazing connections, and like I could have used them to build a community where like we weren't the experts, but like these people were. And so I think you can either you can either build through the person or through the expertise, and like your company is like the tour guide, like your group is the tour guide. We're going to bring you the best. Maybe another one's like isn't there one that for product marketing association, like something like that? I think is very smart also.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question, Chris.
Let's
Ready?
roll. Yeah.
Okay, let's do one more.
Plenty of communities that aren't led by like a person. Yep, let's go.
Okay. Okay. Todd's going to ask a question that someone dropped in the chat earlier, but he has some context he'd like to add to it.
Yeah, so I'm curious about your moderation technique for the communities that are on different platforms like Facebook or even LinkedIn groups. Do you go in there and actually moderate everything, or do you elevate people that are active to kind of ingrain them more in the community, or hire an external moderator? Like, what's your strategy for that?
I mean, there's not much, and I think a lot of that is because the community polices itself in a very good way, and so members will mark. So first of all, when you join the group, I have like 10 rules that are spelled out, and it's like, don't be like I've clearly written like, don't be promotional. You can't promote this. You can't do this. No hate speech or bullying. And then I have one rule that's like Dave's discretion. Like basically you joining my community is like, I'm the ultimate moderator. And so like, if I think that somebody just posts something, I can't articulate why I don't think that's valuable. I just reserve the right to take it down because I'm going to just do what I think is best for the overall group. There hasn't been hate speech or bullying, and so like that stuff hasn't come up, and I think that's a reflection of the people that are in the community. But I think people would flag things. People send me things all the time, or try to send me things, or they mark posts on their own. But then also like the one of the positives about Facebook, like versus Slack, for example, is like there's actually an algorithm in the Facebook group. And so like the posts that show up when you visit the group are going to be the ones that have engagement and have comments. And so like if someone's kind of just like spam posting, like let's say it's not inappropriate, but it's like, does anyone know how to set up Google Analytics? Like somebody will ask something like that in Dgmg, and like that's just not the place to ask that question. And so like I could either, if I see it, I remove it, or if a member sees it, they might comment like, really? Like the community people, I mean, that's why a community can be amazing, is like you kind of tap into the wisdom of the crowd. But I've thought about, could I hire somebody else to do it? And I think one of the hard parts is like one of the unique value props is that is me and I'm commenting on people's stuff. But I think you could totally hire someone to do it and give them examples and guardrails to remove stuff.
Cool. Yeah, one of one of the things that I've done in the past is kind of identified people that are more active than others and giving good advice, and kind of promoted those sort of people to moderators to kind of keep them ingrained in that community.
Yeah.
I was just curious if you.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of this is like, I actually think one of the amazing things about the community is like, there's usually like, there's 10 to 20 people who I could like recognize their face, are super vocal, are always in there. And I have trust that like, I'll probably see something. If something bubbles up, I will see it in some form and be able to address it.
All right, everyone. We're getting close to time here. We're going to get ready to close out. I'm going to do a little bit of a summary, and then we'll get everyone back to their regular scheduling program for the day. So a couple of reflections for me. I think starting in a public place to demonstrate that you can produce content on a regular basis, that people like it, to kind of almost like a proof of concept, product market fit might be a way to look at that before you move into a community, so that you know that you're organizationally ready in order to do that. And some of the ingredients there, expertise, having a hook, proper segmentation, things like that. Dave, also, I'm going to have April Dunford the best on the podcast later today, so we'll talk about positioning on the podcast. So a lot of those things. Another reflection is like, it doesn't necessarily, especially at the beginning, matter which platform or technology you choose to do it. You're looking for just like, am I able to get to the next stage? Can I get a proof of concept where there's 10, 50, 100, 1,000 people, whatever your number is, in here that are engaged and like it? If we need to adjust or move or things over time, we can. And then the last one for me is that you need to be listening in there. Like if you're the person responsible, you need to be in there all the time, collecting the feedback, figuring out what are other ways that we can provide value to these people, or add on services or things that may not just be posting content in a group. So Dave, I'll pass it to you if you have a couple closing thoughts on that, but that was my roundup.
I saw Ashley had a good comment. I think that the moderation, even though it is a paid community, I'm not asking anybody to work. It just kind of, it happens because people want to, hopefully are like almost in life where you want to be a good citizen and like make where you're at better. It's cool. People just kind of moderate their behavior that way. I actually have a question for everybody, because I don't have a call to action or anything, but like this topic of community is like, I love talking about this topic the most. Like who do you get that information from now? And like, how could I talk more about community where it would be meaningful? And maybe Chris, even for you, like, I think like separate, this is a topic for me that is like related to B2B marketing, but even goes above it and different. And people always like the engagement on this topic is high.
Mm-hmm. So drop in any thoughts for that. We'll check the chat afterwards. So if you have any thoughts on Dave's question, let us know. And thank you everyone for attending. The next one, if you can believe it or not, we'll see you here next month, which will be the week after Thanksgiving for those in the US or otherwise, but we'll see you in the first week of December on, I think, Thursday, December 2nd. And so with all that said, it was great to have you all here. Can't wait till next time. Thanks a lot, Dave, for participating, and we'll see you all soon.